Mike Lawrence. I'm the chairman of the planning committee. To my right is Councillor Bob Cope, who's the vice chairman. To his right, we've got Annette Roberts, who is the corporate director for planning and infrastructure. To my left, we've got Mrs. Pardeep Sharma, who's our solicitor. Kelly Harris, the lead planning manager. Lucy, I forgot your last name. Duffy, apologies. Lucy Duffy, who's the planning officer, and Alison, and I've forgotten her. Amanda, thank you very much. Who's our technical officer. Let's hope that's all the mistakes I make tonight. Okay, let's go to business, please. The minutes of the last meeting. Members, can we confirm the minutes of the last meeting on a true record, please? Thank you very much for that. Apologies. I have got apologies from Councillor Terry Mason, Councillor Roger Lees and Councillor Bob Spencer. Are there any other apologies, please? No, thank you. We now go to declarations of interest, and before I invite members to declare any interests, I just want to introduce Mrs. Sharma, who's going to make an observation about planning applications at 4 and 5.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. As members will note, there are 2 applications today in relation to council land, and members may already be aware that you have got a dispensation by the monitoring officer which has been granted to you to enable you to consider and vote on those applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sharma. Does any other member wish to make any declaration, please? No, thank you for that. In that case, we'll move on to the determination of planning applications. And the first planning application is 21/00867 FUL. And Mrs. Duffy will just summarise the application for us. Thank you.
This application proposes a 2-storey detached dwelling within an area immediately south-east of the old vicarage. The property is within the open countryside beyond the West Midlands Greenbelt. Policy OC1 sets out 4 categories of new building that will normally be permitted in the open countryside, but the proposed development does not fall into any of those categories. It is therefore contrary to policy OC1. However, the site benefits from a fallback position of an extant permission for a new dwelling which was allowed on appeal due to the lack of 5-year housing land supply at the time, and the inspector considered that the location to be sustainable and accessible with very limited environmental harm. The appeal decision fallback position and self-build nature of the proposal is sufficient justification to recommend that this proposal is acceptable in principle. The design was amended during the course of the application, replacing the extensive front elevation glazing with a traditional window layout to be more in keeping with the adjacent traditional property. There are no concerns arising in respect of neighbour amenity or highway impacts. The applicant has confirmed that they are willing to pay the required mitigation contribution towards Cannock Chase SAC. It is therefore considered that permission should be granted, subject to a number of conditions, and the completion of a unilateral undertaking in respect to the SAC contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Bates and Councillor Ford, both members of the Planning Committee, are present tonight. Do you wish to speak? Thank you, Mr. Bates. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to propose approval, and I'm looking now at the conclusions under 6.1. Where it states there's an extant permission for a dwelling to be built on the site, whilst it's recognised that this permission was for a bungalow. For the reasons given in the report, it is not considered that the erection of a 2-storey dwelling would give rise to any undue harm on the character of the open countryside in this location. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ford, you wish to speak? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid I disagree strongly with my opposite number. this faces on to what was my land beforehand. This is actually being built in the garden of the old vicarage. Now, it was allowed on appeal simply because we hadn't got our percentage number right, just as Blue homes were built in Penkridge because we hadn't got that. This is one house, and it was never intended to be a two-story, four-bedroom house. The only thing that was ever asked for before was a bungalow, which would be in keeping with the village amenities. There are one or two bigger houses round about, but they are down the lane leading to this. And I really do think that a four-bedroom, two-story house in the garden of the old vicarage seems a little bit insensitive and a little bit more than is absolutely required. So although I have no objection at all, well, we can't have an objection because it's been allowed on appeal, but I don't think it was necessarily intended by the inspector that it should suddenly become a large home. So I would say that that is very much in excess of what is required in the garden of another property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. You want to speak, Kelly? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to address the points that have been raised, in terms of it being in close proximity or in the garden, as Councillor Ford referred to, this matter is covered in the report under section 5.5 about impact on neighbouring amenity, and it does confirm that it will be approximately 40 metres from the nearest habitable window, with no directly facing windows. So in terms of our standards, it does meet that, and it is quite some distance from those properties. Councillor Ford is right that yes, the principle was established on appeal, and we have to give that weight because the permission is still extant, which they could build. Again, in 5.5.4 and 3, the size of the property is considered, and yes, whilst it is a two-storey house, it was always a sizeable bungalow, and it is considered by the case officer to be in keeping because of the other two-storey properties in and around that area. I think all these points have been addressed and considered by the case officer, and I say the overall increase in bulk of a two-storey compared to a bungalow has been considered and doesn't have a detrimental impact on the character of the open countryside, which is ultimately the test. And again, as Lucy said in the introduction, it was considered to be a sustainable location for a property of this nature.
Thank you, Kelly. Does any other member wish to speak? Robert Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the application that we've got in front of us is the one that we've got to be decided on, and not what the councillor has said she preferred. So I'm only going to judge my opinion and the way I vote on what I've got in front of me tonight. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Penny-Allen, please.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question about the self-build element of this? Whether that's carried much weight?
Over to you, Kelly.
Just bear me a second while I just find it in the report. Yeah, I've got it. It's 5.3.5. If you look at the report, it's considered there. The Self-Build and Custom House Building Act does place a duty on this as an authority to keep a register of individuals, which we do keep that. And then we look at applications that come through to make sure we're meeting the requirements of that register. As it stands, South Staffordshire doesn't have a large register of interest for self-builders compared to a number of other authorities. But we're still very important that we do, where we have such applications like this, we are recording that it is as part of that duty meeting it. So whilst there has been some weight given to it, I think the bigger position would be the fallback that there is an extant planning permission on here for a dwelling.
Yes, thank you for that. Any other member wish to comment before we put it to the vote? No, nobody else wants to speak. Well, the recommendation is to delegate approval to the development management manager, subject to the unilateral undertaking. Are you all agreed? Please show in the normal manner. Thank you. I apologise. I thought we were only 17 here. Does anybody object to that? Abstain. Abstain. Thank you very much.
Could I kindly ask the chairman to remove his mask when he's speaking? It does. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the second item on the agenda, please. It's 21 oblique 01171 oblique FUL. It's an application regarding 4 Johns Gate. And Lucy, if you can just summarise the application for us.
The application relates to 4 Johns Gate, a detached dwelling positioned within a private cul-de-sac. It is proposed to erect a single-storey front extension to accommodate a study and an enlarged porch. Concerns have been raised regarding neighbouring amenity, highway visibility and impact on the street scene. There is ample room on the frontage of the property to accommodate the extension, and based on the size of the extension and its single-storey nature, there are no concerns arising in respect of neighbour amenity or impact on the street scene. There are other dwellings within the cul-de-sac which sit further forward than this extension, and it would be finished in matching materials to match the existing. The County Highways Officer has been consulted, who raises no concerns in respect of highway safety. It is therefore considered that permission should be granted, subject to a number of conditions.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. I see that we've got 2 speakers. Mr. Chris Alcott, the applicant, speaking for, and Mr. Peter Rivers speaking against. I've also got Councillor Wendy Sutton down. Is she present tonight? She's virtual. Thank you very much. Okay, can I therefore call the applicant, Mr. Chris Alcott, please? Mr. Alcott, you've got 5 minutes. Sorry, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. For your presentation. Thank you.
Just testing. Perfect. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Alcott, the joint owner, occupier of number 4 Johns Gate, and addressing the committee this evening to provide a response to the objection submitted by Mr. PMU and AJ Rivers on the 30th of November 2021. Firstly, the objection refers to the size of the extension being too large and invasive and over double the width of the existing porch. We have carefully considered the size of the submitted plans for the smallest possible extension, which will provide the required space for a growing family, the necessity to work from home, and allow for downstairs sleeping and showering facilities should our parents require an increased level of care and support in the future. Secondly, reference to the vision reversing out of the garage and view up the gate have been made. The view of the gate refers to the objector's view over our land, which I understand is not an issue that I should address. We live at the bottom of a single-track cul-de-sac, housing just 11 properties. Therefore, the number of vehicles moving each day is minimal. The view from the neighbouring property's garage door to their entry onto the shared private road is not obscured. The view to the top of the road over our land, which is in excess of 30 metres away, would be marginally obscured by the proposed extension. However, the same view would, and often is, obscured by any vehicle parked in our driveway. Finally, there are comments regarding visual balance, reducing separation between 2 properties, and devaluing of a property. The proposal isn't for a radical transformation, but a simple modernisation, bringing the property's aesthetics in line with houses built on the newer estates within Brood, and also with similarities to houses currently undergoing modernisation on neighbouring gates and on Crestwood Park. We also plan to vastly improve the property NG rating through improved insulation and A+ rated doors and windows. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alcott. Mr. Rivers, if you want to take your place now. Thank you. Mr Rivers, you two have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We knew the existing porch was to be replaced, but when we found out it was over double the depth and half the width of the house, we were stunned and speechless at the huge size. Depth of the proposed extension, 8 feet 3 inches wide and 9 feet tall, which is a huge and massively over the building line, and will only be 4 feet from our boundary. Years ago, we considered extending a bay forward in our lounge, and we were told then by the council planning that we could go no further forward than 3 feet because of the building line. This is nearly 3 times that. The proposal would create a shadowed corner, which would be an open invitation to anyone who wished to hide and break into our back gate, our garage or our front door. We will be shielded by this huge wall and is therefore a security risk. And in addition, reversing out of our garage will become difficult because of the reduced visibility. What is not shown on the plans from number 4 is the relationship between the 2 houses and how close we are, and does not display how offensive this proposal would be to us. Although we have been here for 50 years and appear elderly, that's because we are, we welcome Chris and his family as the next generation we need, and are delighted with the improvements completed so far, and we know that things are going to change. So there is no sour grapes on our part at all. If the proposed study is so necessary, the same dimensions can be achieved by extending back into the garden and levelling up with our own garage extension instead of going towards the road. This proposal is a full-sized room across our side vision, an ugly brick wall, 8 feet 3 inches long by 9 feet tall, 4 feet from our boundary. And it could be built on in the future, it could go upwards, further devastation, totally blocking our upstairs window. The size of this proposal would be a blight on the whole gate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the 10 and the other members of the council who attended on Monday for your interest.
Thank you, Mr Rivers. Is Councillor Sutton going to speak virtually? She is. In that case, I'll now call Councillor Sutton, please.
Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. I would like to explain why I asked to call this committee, this application in before this committee. You'll have to forgive me, I'm going to take my vision off because I have problems with the internet. I've called this matter in relation to what I consider to be a detrimental impact of this application on the street scene and the amenity of the neighbouring dwellings, one of which is Mr Rivers, who's just spoken to yourselves. I also have some concerns about the quite boxy design of this particular application, although in keeping with what is currently there, I think it is quite a detrimental impact upon the street scene. And I use as my references core policy 4, where we are promoting high quality design. And that isn't just about developing properties, but also developing extensions to properties to make them more quality and high quality in their design. Policy EQ9, which we are protecting at the residential amenity. I've certainly Mr Rivers at number 5 and the impact of this extension. And also policy EQ11, where I have some really concerns about the design of this particular application. And I'd like to thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. We've got Councillor Diane Holmes, who is a member of the Planning Committee. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Holmes? Go ahead.
Sorry, do you wish me to stand?
I don't know. If you're more comfortable, please, yeah, do so.
No, I'd rather sit, thank you. And flying in the face of what we've just heard, as in I have noted, I have some notes that I wish to read from. Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you to everyone who attended the site visit yesterday, officers, chairman and fellow councillors. This application to extend the frontage of number 4 Johns Gate in Brood is, in my opinion, too large and invasive. The impact on the neighbouring property would inhibit the openness of theirs, the neighbours' frontage, introducing, as it would, a block of brick wall to one side of their drive, which is at present open and has been for the 53 years they have been living there. This extension may sit well with the design of the existing house, but it would certainly affect the comfort of the residents next door and the openness which they have enjoyed for those 53 years. They're reversing as they drive out onto a very narrow road, which at best is difficult to manoeuvre onto, will be made worse being at the head of the cul-de-sac on which they live. As far as policies EQ9 and EQ11 are concerned, this extension would certainly impact on the character of this end of the cul-de-sac, and number 5 in particular, blocking the openness, as it would, their frontage and approach to their property. All in all, I feel that this proposed application would unacceptably harm the character and appearance of the neighbouring property, and as such, I propose the refusal of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Does any other member? Sorry. Does any other member wish to second the proposal to refuse, please? Councillor Ball, you wish to? Yes, thank you. Okay. Okay, we'll go to debate on this matter then. Who wants to start? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I wasn't able to go to the actual site visit, but I have looked at this online and to look at the satellite view and so forth. It's very obvious from the layout of this road that the frontages of these properties are staggered, and one would expect in a development like this for there to be room for extensions both front and rear if you look at the building lines on the other properties in this particular road. Personally, I don't see, I see from the officer's report that full consideration is being given to the neighbours' objections. I think we have to uphold the officer's report in that. I understand the needs of a growing family. I understand the need for downstairs facilities for people, for the future and for their family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Robert Reid, you wish to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that members that actually attended the site visits on Monday would appreciate the situation that's been discussed. I found that the proposals for the extensions were totally acceptable, and having looked at it closely with measurements taken by walking down to the windows and seeing exactly where it was going to be, I found that I could not support whatsoever the proposal for refusal. Also, the fact that there was some mention about visibility reversing or driving out of the neighbour's property, I should imagine that they're only going about 2 or 3 miles an hour. I just can't see that as a valid reason. So I'm afraid, as far as the members for Brood, I can't support them, and I shall be voting against that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Does any other member wish to speak? Members that went on site visits, yes. Councillor Chris Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having been on the site visit, it was plainly obvious there isn't a building line in this cul-de-sac. As previously mentioned, all the properties going up the cul-de-sac are staggered 5 to 10 metres each time. So we're not here really to say whether we think it's a particularly good design. That is covered by the officer's report anyway, and the impact on the amenity. So really it was very difficult to find a reason to support refusal. So that's all I'd like to say. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Any other member wish to speak? I'll just add my comments then. I went on the site visit. When I first read the report a couple of weeks ago, I thought, oh no, because I don't like development at the front of properties. And if these properties had been in line, I could support the proposal. But quite clearly, the street, it's a private road, an unadopted road, so there's not much traffic on it. The houses in that street are staggered. So the impact of this development, and there is an impact, a very slight overshadowing, which I accept, but I don't believe that that alone is sufficient to enable me to support the proposal to refuse this application. Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? No, in that case, Councillor Holmes, do you wish to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have already heard what I've got to say, and I do stand by what I recommended, as in the policies EQ9 and EQ11. This extension will certainly have an impact on next door neighbours' facilities and amenities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay then, members, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of refusing this application, please show them on the round. All those against, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? No. Thank you. The proposal is refused. We'll now move on to the application itself.
Sorry to interrupt. Okay, so that was a motion for refusal. We now need a motion, Chair, to approve this application.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I shall now make that proposal myself. I now propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and agree the approval of this application.
All those in favour?
Seconded, please. Thank you, Robert. Yes, we'll go to the vote, please. All those in favour of the application?
Was your hand up?
No.
12, 13. Yes, 13 in favour.
Thank you. Those against, please. Thank you. Any abstentions? No. Thank you. So that application has been approved. Thank you, members. Thank you, members. We now move on to the next application, which is 21/0190 FUL. And it's Mile Flat House, Mile Flat Green Forge. Lucy, can you just summarise the application for us?
The application site relates to a two-storey dwelling with a detached garage set back from the highway along Mile Flat. The application proposes to demolish the existing house and detached garage and erect a large 4-bed replacement dwelling in a similar position. Amended plans have been submitted throughout the course of the application to reduce the size of the proposal to reflect the fallback position of the permitted development rights, along with the granted planning permissions for extensions. The creation of a new access has also been deleted from the scheme in accordance with the highway team comments. The replacement dwelling would be of a contemporary design and have an attached triple garage, but would retain a hipped roof like the existing. The replacement dwelling would be materially larger and above the 10 to 20% guidance contained within the Council's Greenbelt and Open Countryside SPD. The proposal would constitute inappropriate development, which is harmful to the Greenbelt by definition. There is a fallback position deriving from granting planning permissions and permitted development rights, which amounts to the very special circumstances needed to clearly outweigh this potential harm. The proposed scheme offers additional benefits with lower ridged heights, reduction in the bulk and mass of the proposal by 72 cubic metres, along with a more attractive design than the fallback position. The contemporary design within the rural area is considered acceptable in this instance, given the existing contemporary dwellings that are sited within close proximity. The concerns raised by consultees have been addressed, and it is therefore considered that permission should be granted, subject to a number of conditions. And there's also an update in relation to the highway objection that has since been removed, and they now offer no objection subject to conditions, and the proposed site plan has been updated to remove the side access in line with their comments. And condition 2 has been amended, and there is also another 3 highways conditions so we would need to change the conditions and add them in at 13, 14 and 15. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Councillor Hingley, local member, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the officer, and as long as the conditions are kept, I approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hingley. Does any other member wish to speak? Can't see anybody. In that case, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please, of the application. Thank you. That's unanimous. The application is approved. Moving on now to application 21/01286 COU. This is the council offices that we're sitting in. Lucy, can you just summarise, please?
Planning permission was granted in 2019 for an extension to the existing council offices to provide a new library area, retail unit and more prominent entrance from Wolverhampton Road. The proposal also included the remodel of an existing parking area of Histons Hill, internal rearrangements and the inclusion of a medical centre. Alterations to this permission were recently made to the change of the retail unit with a children's nursery. This proposal seeks to make further revisions to the change of the small cafe area on the ground floor to a chiropodist. The use would operate between the hours of 7 AM and 8 PM Monday to Saturday and requires no changes to the external fabric of the building. Chiropodists are considered to be a neighbour-friendly use, and the proposal would not result in any significant travel movements. The highways team have raised no objections to the proposal, and it is considered that there would be no adverse effect on the neighbouring amenity in accordance with local plan policy EQ9. It is therefore considered that permission should be granted subject to a number of conditions. And there's a note on the update list that county highways offer no objections. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Councillor Ewart, local member, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I shall be brief because this is Burns' birthday, the 25th of January, and I'll be going home shortly for haggis and meats and tatties. Consequently, the other thing about this is that I've never used a chiropodist. I have no personal interest one way or the other in this, and I can only say that it seems very much worthy of our support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ewart. Does any other member wish to speak? No, in that case, let's vote on it. The recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions. All those in favour? The last planning application is 21/01287/ADV, and again it refers to these council buildings, and Lucy will summarise. Thank you, Lucy.
This application relates to an upgrade and improvement of the existing signage around the site to reflect the rebranding of the council offices as Codsall Community Hub, along with the new signage to promote the Codsall Community Nursery. The signs are to be installed throughout the site and relate to a number of provisions, including directional and parking signs within the car parking areas. Others include a sign for the nursery principal window and 2 community hub directional signs, all within the site's curtilage. The 2 totem poles, the 2 totem signs, by the main entrance off Wolverhampton Road will be illuminated. The rest of the signs will not. The Highways team have raised no objections to the proposal, and it is not considered that the proposal would have an adverse effect on the visual amenity of the area or on the neighbouring amenity in accordance with local plan policies EQ9 and EQ11. It is therefore considered that permission should be granted, subject to a number of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Ewart again.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Of course, we ought to approve this thing. There's really no question about it. I remember Imi Tolgesi showed me the design for the new illuminated signs each side of the entrance onto the main road there. And apparently the damage is referred to somewhere in the report was caused by the cooperative truck making a turning in entrance, which was rather naughty of them. But yes, indeed, this is a perfectly sound proposal, and of course we should agree it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? No. In that case, the recommendation is to approve with conditions. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. The application is approved. Thank you, members. That completes the applications, planning applications. We've now got the report of the lead planning manager. Over to you, Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As usual, the monthly report covers the items of training, changes in national policy, appeals, performance in planning enforcement, and then in planning applications. So members will be aware we held a training session this evening with members here in the committee, but also from those that are remote, and that was run by our barrister Piers Riley-Smith on making good decisions. Well attended, and hope that members actually found that a useful training session. We have another training session scheduled before the next planning committee meeting, and the training relates to section 106 agreements, again being run by peers. So same approach as before, a hybrid meeting for members of planning committee to attend the room here, and we'll also be doing it virtually for those that want to watch remotely. We are looking at further training sessions around permitted development, building better, building beautiful, looking through some of the feedback we had from the member questionnaires, as well as to how we could address some of those requests. But if you have any further suggestions, as always, please do let me know. The next item relates to a change in national policy, and it's about the previous changes to permitted development rights that were meant to be temporary during 2020 and to help through COVID restrictions. Those temporary measures were to include boosting high streets and small businesses to allow outside gazebos and the like to be constructed to keep businesses going. The changes have now been made permanent, and you can see that in the link that I've included in the document around what those proposals are. The full details aren't into legislation yet, but that link gives you to the government of what they're doing and the timescales for bringing those permanent changes to permitted development rights in. Turning then to planning appeals, there has been 2 appeals since the last report. The first relates to a lime tree crown lift about overhanging branches at Pinewood Heights in Acton Trussell. The appeal was allowed, subject to a number of rather strict conditions. The inspector concluded that whilst the works would affect the amenity value of the tree, which is what the officer had said, the inspector felt that the visual impact of the works from the public domain because of where it's located was negligible. And that the inspector felt that there was sufficient need for the works, and because of that the appeal was allowed. The second one relates to the refusal for an extension to a stable block to add additional stables and hay store and grooming and other horticulture features to it at Shawcroft on Sandy Lane in Hatherton. The appeal was dismissed. The inspector concluded that the very special circumstances that would be normally necessary to justify such development did not exist in this case, and that the harm to the greenbelt and the character would be outweighed by those benefits of improving that stabling condition. So that was dismissed, both of which are appended to my report. Turning now to planning enforcement, there is an update since last month, and I'm pleased to say that the new statistics show us at 83.5%, which is above the 80% target. We still have a very high workload in planning enforcement, even though we are now triaging cases and removing them from being logged if they aren't a planning enforcement matter, which does help the efficiency of dealing with those cases. But they are still a very high number of them, and also complex ones, including a number of enforcement notices either being served or in draft. We are now up to full strength with the latest member of the team, Jenny Thompson. She's now started with us, and that completes the planning enforcement team once again. Finally then, turning to the statistics for planning applications, you'll see on the final page of my report that we relate to speed and are determining it in the timescales that we're required to, and then quality, which relates to appeals and overturns of appeals, overturns of applications at appeal. In terms of speed, for major applications, we need to be determining 60% of them or more in the timescales, and we're currently at 95.9, so well above target. And then for other applications, it's 70% or above, and we're at 84.7%. Those have been updated since the last report and show that we have actually improved on the previous period. The quality, which relates to planning appeals for majors and others, both are required to be below 10%, and for majors we're at 3.7% and we are at 1% for others. That statistic hasn't been updated since the last report, and as you can see it relates back to March 2020 because they look in a 2-year window, so we expect that one to be updated quite soon. And that concludes my report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Kelly. Members, any questions, please? Yeah, Chris Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. It's to do with open planning enforcement cases. Is there any way we can view a list? And because I'm forever asked about a particular item that keeps cropping up in my ward, and I've either got to send an email every time. It'd be better if I could actually view a list of actual open enforcement cases. Is that possible?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have in the past provided such lists to members. Obviously, they're for members' information only because they do contain information about the cases, and some of them are yet to be proven that they've breached any planning considerations. We haven't been able to provide it in the last few months just due to vacancies in the team and capacity and the workload. It hasn't been prioritised amongst dealing with the investigations, but I'll certainly take that back to the team. And now that we're at full strength, we'll see that those reports are circulated once again to members.
Can I just come back The particular case I'm talking about as well, it's an interesting one. It's county council owned land, and yet, am I right in saying that the district council are the enforcement agency?
The point that we're not here to discuss actually individual cases. I think, you know, the idea was just to give you the statistics, and of course, if it's a case that we haven't actually investigated. So I think that's a question which I would say could be answered outside of the meeting, if that's okay.
Okay.
I was just going to reply to say I'll speak to you after the meeting, if that's okay. Thank you, Councillor Steele.
Okay, no other questions? I've got a question then for you, members. What do you think of the training session? Was it worth your while coming? Great. It was. I felt it was very good. He's a very knowledgeable fellow, and he speaks well. I'm looking forward to his next one next month. So hope you can all spare the time next month and come again. In that case, I'm going to end the planning committee. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Safe journey home. Thank you.